Laurel Canyon Boulevard is a historically famous road in Hollywood, California. Many celebrities have lived on or right off of Laurel Canyon. The mansions on Laurel Canyon have been home to stars such as Andy Samberg, Christina Applegate, Harry Houdini, and even Jim Morrison. I just moved to LA to further my career as a stuntman, and I was lucky enough to find a house on Laurel Canyon that actually fit my budget. It's an older house, and most of the houses around it are older, including a mansion located right in the middle of the hillside across the street. There are very few vacancies in my area, but this mansion across the street actually looked to be abandoned. I couldn't help but wonder why such a beautiful home in such a prime location would be abandoned. I thought maybe since it was on the hillside and California is prone to earthquakes that maybe it had some structural damage that made it unfit for occupancy. Who knows? I struggle with insomnia from time to time, and one Tuesday night I got sick of tossing and turning for hours, so I got up and went out front to have a cigarette. I looked at my phone as I was walking outside and saw that it was a little after 2 a.m. As I was smoking and just observing my surroundings, I caught a glimpse of movement up at the old abandoned house. I stood up and walked over to the side of the front yard to get a better view. There was a black SUV in the driveway of the abandoned house. This was the first time I'd ever seen a vehicle up there. I then saw two men dressed in all black carrying what looked to be a big black bag from the house to the SUV. They opened the hatch, threw the bag in the back, got in, and drove away. I'm not proud to say it, but I've always been the type to snoop into things that weren't any of my business. I finished my smoke, went back inside, went back to bed, and eventually fell asleep. But all I could think about as I was laying there was what I'd seen. Who were these men? Why were they dressed in all black? And what was in that big-ass bag they were carrying? Maybe the house isn't abandoned after all. When I woke up the next morning, I was still thinking about what I'd seen, so I decided that I would hike up the hill and see if the house looked like it was actually occupied. I put on some hiking shoes and proceeded to hike up the hill. I could have walked along the road and down the extra long driveway, but that would have taken way too long. Plus, I'm pretty sure the driveway was gated, so I wouldn't have been able to get past the gate. It wasn't easy, but I hiked up the hill and eventually got to the house. I immediately started investigating the situation. The first thing I noticed was the plywood on some of the windows. This is usually a dead giveaway that the house was indeed abandoned. I noticed that there were vines growing up the outer walls of the house and that the grass was overgrown. I tried to peek in the windows, but there were dark curtains inside every window which impeded me from seeing inside the house. All signs pointed to a house that had not been inhabited for years. There was one thing that seemed out of place though. The front door looked to be almost brand new. I knocked on the door just for the hell of it, and of course nobody answered. I hiked back down the hill, across the street to my house, frustrated that I hadn't really gotten any answers. The house definitely seemed abandoned, but who were those guys and why was there a brand new door? I kept an eye out the next few nights and never saw anything or anyone go into the house on the hill. I pretty much let the whole thing go when I finally saw it again. Exactly 1 week later, the next Tuesday night, I went out around 2 a.m. and there it was. The same black SUV in the driveway. Shortly after I noticed the SUV, again, I saw two men dressed in all black. Again, they were carrying a big black bag to the SUV. They threw it in the back, got in, and drove away. It was almost exactly the same situation from the week before. My adrenaline rushed and my curiosity boiled. I had to figure out what the hell was going on every Tuesday night around 2 a.m. with these men in black and their black bags and their black SUV at the abandoned house on the hill. I have a very vivid imagination and my thoughts were racing. Maybe I've seen too many movies, but I felt like there was definitely a mystery here and I needed to be the man to solve it. I threw on a black shirt and black sweatpants and my hiking shoes. I crossed the street and hiked up the hill to the old house. It was dark, so it made the steep terrain that much more difficult. I didn't bring a flashlight because I wanted to be as stealthy as possible. Once I got to the old house, I looked around to see if there were any clues around to see what the hell is going on here. I didn't find shit. I decided to check the windows and see if maybe one of them was unlocked. No luck. Every door, every window, locked. I don't know if it was the adrenaline pumping through my veins or if I'm naturally this reckless, but I decided to kick in one of the basement windows. The wood was old and soft, so the first window I chose kicked in right away. I kicked the frame so I wouldn't actually break the glass, just the lock. And just like that, I was in. Once I was inside, I wasn't sure what I was even looking for. The inside of the house was bare. There was no furniture at all. I walked through the basement until I found the stairs to the next floor. Since it was on a hillside, the house was tall. There were 4 floors, including the basement. I climbed the stairs to the next floor. This floor was also bare. There were quite a few rooms. The kitchen was on this floor. I went over and tried to turn on the faucet. Nothing. The water was off. Checking the water gave me the idea to check the power. I flipped the light switch on. Nothing. No water, no power, no furniture. Nobody lived here. And that was officially confirmed. I climbed the stairs to the next floor. There was a couple bedrooms and a bathroom, all empty. There were no signs of anything here. No clues whatsoever. I climbed to the top floor. There was a hallway at the top of the stairs and a door at the end of the hallway. It was locked. My sense of mystery once again ramped up. I was convinced that something was behind this door. I took a step back and kicked the door as hard as I could. Like the basement window, it broke on the first try. As much as I had a feeling that something strange was going on here, I was not prepared for what I was about to see. The whole floor was one big room, the master bedroom of the house. It was no longer a bedroom though. There was a large metal table in the center of the room and a large wooden chair right behind it. I looked to the left and there were multiple black tarps folded up on the floor. There was a video camera and 2 spotlights facing the table and the chair. They were off. And the walls were lined with what looked to be an assortment of torture tools. There was one section of assorted knives from the size of a scalpel all the way up to a machete. There were blow torches, a few different types of axes, a row of pliers lined up from small to large, and there were a bunch of other things that I could only describe as torture devices. Some of them looked like they'd come straight out of a medieval dungeon. As I finished scanning the inside of the room, my stomach dropped. What in the fuck did I just stumble upon? I ran back down the stairs until I got to the main floor and I ran out into the driveway. I immediately called the cops and frantically told them what I just found. They told me that an officer would be there shortly. I hung up the phone, pulled out a cigarette, and paced back and forth impatiently, waiting for law enforcement to arrive. About 5 minutes later, an unmarked squad car came down the long driveway. 2 uniformed officers stepped out and began to approach me. As the officers were walking up, though, that same black SUV pulled in the driveway behind the cop car. The 2 men remained in the SUV as the cops began to question me in the driveway. Okay, kid, what's going on here? This house has some kind of a torture chamber inside, and I think those guys have something to do with it. Don't worry, son, they're with us. What are you doing up here anyway? And you said you were inside the house? That's called trespassing, kid, and it's a very serious offense. Officer, please, I understand, but you have to believe me right now. There's something really fucked up going on here. Look at him, Larry. He's probably tweaking out on drugs. Let's just take him downtown and book him for trespassing. I'm not on drugs. Look, just let me show you the room and... Hey, okay, kid. We'll check out this so-called torture chamber. But if you're making it up, I'm going to hit you with as many charges as I possibly can. Fine, just follow me. so I led them into the house. I looked back and I saw the two men get out of the SUV right as I went to the front door. I turned back around to navigate the house, and the cops each turned on a flashlight. After I took a few steps in, though, I felt a sharp pain in my neck. My body quickly became weak, and I fell to the floor, unable to move. Before I completely lost consciousness, I heard one of the cops give orders to the two thugs from the SUV. "Brock, get him in the chair. Tony, grab the rope and tie him up. I'm gonna call the client and see if he can possibly make it here on short notice." When I came to, I was tied to the chair in the torture room. One of the black tarps had been laid out under me. The two spotlights were shining right in my face. I was alone, though. None of the other men were in the room. Rather than handcuff me, the dumb thugs had tied me up with rope. My hands were tied behind the chair and my feet tied to the chair legs. Once I was fully aware of my situation, I started desperately trying to get free. Luckily, the thugs suck at tying knots because it didn't take too long to get my hands free. I then reached down and untied my legs. I was no longer tied up. But now what? Where are the cops? And the thugs? I grabbed one of the gnarliest looking knives that I could find. As I was arming myself, I heard people talking behind the door. I quickly sat back down in the chair and made it look like I was still tied up. I kept the knife right behind my back. The door opened. The two thugs guarded the outside of the door, and the two cops walked in, leading a third guy who was wearing some sort of full-body hazmat-style suit. One of the cops turns on the video camera. "Okay, Doctor, I'm glad you were able to make it on such short notice. You're a returning customer, so you know the rules, but allow me to refresh your memory. The game starts as soon as we see that the $1 million has been deposited into our account. You get 1 hour with the victim. You can kill him anytime during the 1 hour time period, and the body is yours to do with what you like. If the victim isn't dead by the end of the hour, we give you one last chance to kill him. If you do not, we will come in and finish the job. You can keep him on the chair, or we can place him on the table for you. An assortment of weapons and tools has been provided for you. If you need anything, knock twice. Brock and Tony will come in to assist you. Once completed, you get a copy of the video of your experience with us. Any questions before we leave? Would you like us to move him to the table?" The doctor shook his head no as he stared me directly in the eyes with an evil grin on his face. The other cop looked at me and winked. The rage I felt building up inside me was unlike anything that I have ever felt before. The doctor walked around and checked out all the tools and weapons on the wall. He finally grabbed a battery-powered drill and started walking towards me. I knew my attack had to be a kill shot. Adrenaline rushed through my entire body as the doctor got closer. When he was directly in front of me, he turned on the drill and raised it in the air. I launched out of the chair and thrust my knife into his neck. He dropped the drill and tried to scream, but all that did was gargle the blood that was rushing out of his throat. I yanked the knife back out and he grabbed at his neck. The blood spurted out between his fingers. I shoved him to the ground. "Fuck this guy!" I jammed the knife right through his left eyeball. He twitched a few times and then he was gone. Okay, 1 down, 4 to go. How am I going to take out the two thugs at the door? And then the two cops, wherever they are. I left the knife in the doctor's skull and went over to choose another weapon. I scanned over the options, and I made my choice. I grabbed the samurai sword. The cop told the doctor to knock twice and the thugs would come in to assist him. So I went to the door, knocked twice, and stood to the side of the doorway. When the first thug walked in, I swung the sword at his neck so hard that it damn near cut his head all the way off. The second thug saw this, but right as he turned to run, I jammed the samurai sword straight into his spine. He dropped to his knees and then face first onto the floor. I pulled out the sword and looked around. It was dark, so I couldn't see shit, but there didn't seem to be any sign of the cops. I ran through the house, ready to attack anyone in my way. I ran down the steps and made it to the front of the house. The cop car was gone, and so were the two crooked-ass cops. I dropped the sword in the driveway and hiked back down the hillside as fast as I possibly could. When I got to my house, I ran straight to the bathroom, ripped off my bloody clothes, and got in the shower to wash the blood off. I had to think, what do I do now? What's my next move? The cops were in on it. They could have looked up my address while I was knocked out. When they get back to the abandoned house and find out I escaped, they're gonna come looking for me. I feel like I can't trust anybody. Who knows who all could be involved in this Hollywood underground human torture service? I knew I couldn't stay at home, so I packed as much stuff as I could and I went to a hotel room on the other side of Hollywood. I paid cash and I used a fake name. When I got up to my room, I looked out my balcony window and could see the sun was coming up. I took a deep breath, let it out, and thanked God that I was still alive to see another day. I eventually found an apartment in Burbank. Nothing ever came up on the news about what happened at that abandoned Laurel Canyon house that night. Those sick bastards are probably still in business. With police protection, they're pretty much untouchable. I wish that I could stop them for good, but as long as there are vile people willing to pay millions of dollars for something, there will always be someone to offer that service, no matter how sick and twisted it may be.